Welcome to today's LX Views. We will be walking down the East Morehead Street corridor, both on the sidewalks and exploring some of the back lots. Right now we're reviewing the highlights, or at least the highlights to me. We're seeing some of the architecture and other scenery that has found its place on the Morehead Street corridor since its existence. Undergoing significant amount of change, we can see towers starting to be installed, but nestled amongst those towers are still these historic homes. Here's the map of the walk. You can see I largely just stayed on Morehead Street. And now we begin our walk. So we are at the corner of Morehead and East Brooklyn Village Boulevard. I think of it as Park Road by that point. And we are heading eastward up the hill to Tryon Street. Where we are now is near the Atrium Health campus. There's a large hospital there. Many people have come into the world in that maternity ward, my boy included. I recorded this on the 5th of July, so traffic was light. It was a very hot day. It may have been the hottest day all year. It got up to 35 Celsius, 95 Fahrenheit that day. Humid. It's a subtropical summer in the south. Here's an interesting building. I thought that was just very modern and sleek. I love the setback as well. Morehead Street's historically one of the original streets in Charlotte. Gold was discovered on West Morehead Street on the other side of the hill in the early 1800s, and it was at the corner of Graham and Morehead, I believe, and it drew people from across the world to mine it. And if I do cover that side of the Morehead Street, I'll refer to my history book, but there was a colorful character there by the name of Count Chevalier Vincent de Riva Fenoli. He was an Italian nobleman who just came from South America, apparently. He was mining in South America and decided to come to Charlotte to mine some more. But that was a long time ago. That was on this Morehead corridor. Here we're seeing stuff which looks like mid-century to me. I just think that's such a cool form of architecture. All that glass. The landscaping's nice. Looks like there's space available. Morehead Street gets very busy. So an interesting thing about Morehead Street, all through the pandemic and into 2023, I believe, it was effectively 2 lanes. So I'll talk more about that later, but coming up on our left-hand side, we're going to see one of the highlights. First, we're looking out over the Midtown area. So that view is going to change. There's about to be a large tower going in there, which will be visible, I'm assuming. But on our left-hand side is what's called the Morehead Inn. And this was supposedly built in the early 20th century. It was owned by an executive who had a relationship with a car company, or so the story is told to us, in what was the then suburbs of Charlotte. It was owned by some folks that threw apparently one of the best garden parties in all of Charlotte, well into the 1970s. It was well attended. And now they do weddings there. It's a popular wedding venue. My spouse and I did a little Charlotte getaway a few months back, and we stayed there. And all the rooms are named after streets in Dilworth. And we stayed in a room that was named after our street, which was nice. It was cool. The interior decoration was really top notch too. Very historic stuff, museum quality. The Morehead Inn is really fantastic. And then across the street is an interesting old modern building, Art Moderne. The thing that's interesting about it is the neon sign, so it looks cool at night. And then on the left here is just another mid-century building. I think we'll see I don't want to say I don't know what the company does, so I don't want to say their name, but I do love the building itself, the architecture, with those floor-to-ceiling glass windows and the brick approach underneath the low slung trees. Just really pleasant, comfortable. And then the overhang there, it reminded me of New York. It reminded me of Midtown New York, that stuff out by 3rd Ave, which was built in the days when Batman was rappelling up the side of the building to protect Gotham City from the Joker and the Penguin and the Riddler. But anyway, getting back to Morehead. So they were doing construction on Morehead in the earlier part of the 20s, and it led to Morehead being 2 lanes of traffic. And I would go running here. I love to run on the Morehead sidewalks because they're pretty well separated from the street, and there's good shade, and it's downhill towards a greenway. So I'm here all the time. I never really took the time to stop and notice it though. But in any case, it was easier to do so when they were doing construction, and instead of being 4 lanes, it was 2 lanes. And there were, at lights, the lines would get long. But it would be cool. You'd see all these charlatans doing their whatever it is that they were doing, but they'd be like driving BMWs and wearing tuxedos with their spouse in the seat wearing their formal wear as well. And it was cool to see. Sort of, you never see that when traffic's flying by so fast. And ultimately, they're just going to red lights anyway. So I liked it. And it was easier to get across the street when it was 2 lanes too. Here's an old church. It's looks like an old Greek temple to me, so I decided to just kind of document it. I always get a little weirded out going on to church grounds because it's consecrated space, and various philosophies have different perspectives on recording, but I stepped up the slate anyway because I wanted to get a view without the tree obstructing it. And then across the street, we're going to explore some back lots. These are more modern buildings, clearly. They're postmodern in style. I do like how there's that other interplay of the Greek temple on the facade of that building on the left. And here we are going through what feels like a cloister or some sort of Romanesque architecture. And revealed to us is the new Lower McDowell, I think it is, Medical Innovation District. We can see some of the towers going in right immediately in front of us. And then I recorded a video here. So there's a at night. It was a beautiful view at night of the city, of the skyline, of that lower south end skyline, kind of the south uptown skyline. And there it is. And we're just going to look out over it now. We're going to walk through this back lot. And the thing I liked about this back lot was that it was quiet. There's actually 2 old parks on the right-hand side. So this part of town, Brooklyn Village, I've also seen in books it referred to as Log Town. This is where a lot of the folks that were involved with logging initially lived. And then in the middle of the 20th century, in the name of progress, everybody was going to have a home in a car-centric suburb where they would drive into the city to work. So an expressway was installed. And the expressway is on the other side of those trees, basically. Also on the other side of those trees are 2 parks, Pearl Street Park and Baxter Street Park. Pearl Street Park has been extensively redone. There's a significant amount of construction going up all around it related to the Medical Innovation Campus. But if you go under the pavilion, there's a kiosk that has some information, and depicted on it is an old map of the street grid of this whole area. We also have Baxter Street Park, which doesn't really connect to anything at all right now. But I think Baxter Street Park is actually where all those trees that we're seeing on the right-hand side are. But there's some sort of facility, housing facility, between Baxter Street Park and Pearl Street Park. And folks that need that help or just need the housing live there. But yeah, I think Wake Forest is affiliated with these buildings here. We see cranes off in the distance as well. I had mentioned this sort of area on one of my other walks. I think it was the East Trade Street walk, where I talked about the Bistro District. And the Bistro District would be sort of where that second tower nearest to us stops. That's that street still. We're going back onto Morehead now. And we can hear the street noise again. One of the things I would love to see if this corridor does get redeveloped is for the city to build a greenway, much the way that they did with the rail trail, where it's back behind the development on the busy street. So ideally what I'd love to see Morehead Street turned into an East Boulevard, this section of Morehead Street anyway, an East Boulevard style street where there's a nice median with trees. There's turning lanes so traffic doesn't get backed up at intersections, but otherwise it's one lane, potentially with parking in the middle. I'm sure the folks at Covenant Church may appreciate additional places to park. It is what it is, right? People drive cars. And if there's going to be, so in the distance you can see some of the larger buildings that have been built in the last 2 years. There's going to be people in cars, visitors, guests. They're going to need places to park their cars, and I see them doing it on East Boulevard. Construction workers. So we have on East Boulevard. East Boulevard was 4 lanes at one point. And through Dilworth, and sometime I think in the 1990s, early 2000s, they made it 3 lanes with a median and with turning lanes. And it's not the greatest for walking. I walk on it. It's probably one of the more walked streets, and there are cool like bistros and coffee places. There's also just historic like commercial space in use as well, but I feel like the bones of Morehead are very similar. And I don't know if East Boulevard is a test case for traffic volume, but it seems to me that it could be. They seem to be very similar, frankly. So hopefully someone with some vision does something with that. Or at least rules it out. Here's a legacy 20th century strip mall. This reminds me of stuff that you see like up in Commonwealth, which is cool and funky. I crossed the street here. I didn't want to televise it because I think my stuff gets downranked for crossing the street, so I just cut it. I'm not sure. Behind us is the Covenant Church, and then here is an old building, modern, from the 50s. I think it was a dry cleaning place though. Not 100% sure on that. And here's a little bit of nature. We see some birds on this meadow. So this is so behind us is the Dilworth Road entrance. I would love to see the city take steps to really throttle speeds on Dilworth Road. If you look at all of those towers now on Morehead and you think about where the nearest grocery stores are, and you think about the young residents that will be operating those towers and working in those lab towers, and then or so the plan goes, working in those lab towers and then potentially living in those residential towers, needing to go to the grocery store in their automobiles. And it's easy for me to imagine them disrespecting the speed limits on Dilworth Road East and West. So hopefully some steps are taken to physically slow the speeds on those streets. Kids play there. There's a major park there. There's a church with a great preschool. There is soccer fields where many toddlers play soccer shots. There's all kinds of just single family homes. So I'm hoping that the city recognizes that there's no need to be able to do 35, 40 down Dilworth. And the way that the street is constructed now facilitates that sort of speed. On the way to the grocery store. And you can hear the roar of the traffic now going by. That's why I'd love for there just to be on the other side of the street behind all those back lots, just a rail trail style walking path. I'd prefer for it to be unpaved, honestly, just crushed stone and gravel and clay. They have something similar at Freedom Park right now. It's the temporary sidewalk because of some work that they're doing on the Greenway. And it's fine. I wouldn't drive a car on it. Maybe like a light, or really like a dual cab, not a crew cab, just a regular cab Ranger. Is about as heavy as a truck I'd take on it for maintenance. But I wouldn't drive a car on it otherwise. But you could take bikes. You could walk on it. You could run on it. Here we see the Duke Endowment. So it's on Morehead Street. This is the same Duke that the university, the power company, are named after. I don't know which one. This is James B. Duke. I've read in a book he's been referred to as Buck Duke. And this is his view in 2024. When I lived in another part of the state, I used to run past the homestead. It was on my 8-mile route back when I was still doing English measurements. I think it's like 12K. There's one of the new towers. Back behind it's another tower, I think. And then adjacent to it is a tower. And on the left is an interesting building I'd never looked at before, but since I was out walking and exploring, I decided to take a look at it. It's clearly a brutal building. It's brick brutal and not concrete brutal, which is unique. In undergrad, I would study in a brick brutal tower. It was the largest, tallest skyscraper in the region. I used to go up to the 25th floor and take in the views. It was really the 23rd floor was where the most privacy was. But I wanted to explore it. This dual staircase apparently is a Charlotte architectural motif going back to colonial days. They'd have on one side a staircase and on the other side a staircase. And presumably they do business on the porch, using the shade to provide some cooling from the hot and humid summer. I thought this doorway was really interesting. It made the highlights. I think I had to slow it down. It was interesting. It was like brass that had oxidized. Weird texture. And across the street we see those towers. I wonder how many stories they are. I can't quite count them. I have to imagine they're upwards of 12, but less than 20. And descending down through the front yard. What a beautiful setback that was. And here's the new stuff. I'm not sure if folks are occupying these residences yet. It looks like they're starting to market them at the very least. 20 years ago, I'm assuming they would have been condos, condo developments. I don't know if they're condos or rentals. And now we're crossing over an old historic side street. So in the past, that street would have continued on in Uptown. There's Interstate 277 in the way now. That's I think it was called the Douglas Expressway at one point. It's named after some mayor. Douglas was his last name. And the airport in Charlotte is called Charlotte Douglas. So he was an influential mayor when people really started using cars and airplanes. I don't know much else about his record. And then coming up on our left is an old historic home. This made the highlights. Interesting stone wall. I can't tell if that's ivy, English ivy or what, holding down the front yard from eroding onto the sidewalk. It's effective. I need to look into that for my own front landscaping. I'm constantly shoveling mulch. Maybe some grounding like that. Yeah, it's a cool house, a craftsman. You know, take that, Pasadena. Or wait, Pasadena, where you at? Thank you. That's Dr. Dre. Pasadena, where you at? Rolling in my 6'4". What everybody's saying. California love. How many kids do you think walk down the sidewalk being led around by their dog? And we see some street traffic coming up. Hello. I always smile. In the South, it's so unusual to see someone on the sidewalk that you just smile and wave at everybody. It's like, oh, you're all walking too? Hi. Which always, it's nice. I feel like legacy southern cities are a little bit better than the ones that have a lot of transplants. It's that southern hospitality, I think. Maybe the novelty of seeing someone walking on the sidewalk is less exciting for them. And we're starting to see the uptown skyline a little bit more in focus. In front of us is the Dowd YMCA. Young man, there's no need to feel down. I learned to swim at the Y. That's where I learned about U2. I remember having a conversation with my camp counselor that U2's early stuff was better because it wasn't so commercial. But you know what? That Octung baby, you can't beat it. It was so commercial. Here's another old house. I actually prefer the view of it from uptown on, I believe, Caldwell Street. It's so interesting to see the old Victorian inset among the towers and the more recent developments. Here we're viewing an example of what would happen if on the south side of Morehead Street the historical setback is not respected. This whole section left me just feeling uninspired. I think the setbacks are a really nice feature. They create a park-like environment. They're historic, they're genteel, they're sophisticated. It is a little land intensive. There's so much land in Charlotte as it is. What's a front yard going to do, really? Besides what we see here, which is to make, I feel, the parcel more inviting to the public. I wonder if the Dowd Y knows that they have a ersatz skate park in their front yard. Look at that. Stairs, rails, landscaping. Opportunities abound. Get permission. Here we see Uptown coming into focus again. And some of the historic postmoderns that they built, which are now sitting, from what I understand, empty. But I'm assuming that will resolve itself. So here we're going over South Boulevard. This is this part of South Boulevard was built in the 40s, It was part of the Independence Expressway, and that's why Morehead is Morehead is disconnected from South Boulevard. If you look at old historic books of Charlotte, Morehead and South intersected, and I think it was called Morehead Square. It was a center of commerce. And I don't know why this connection was severed. It doesn't seem like... I would love to see it reconnected. I feel like that is just a scar of the 20th century that... If the Douglas Expressway, the Inner Beltway, 277, the connection to Freedom Boulevard had never been constructed, I don't feel like it would make sense to reconnect Morehead and South, but they were all built and they were all finished 30 years ago. We can reconnect Morehead and South, and I think that would just be transformational, in my opinion. I think it'd be pretty low cost too, frankly. Not that you're supposed to look at social improvement projects through the lens of ROI, but I think we could both add a lot of value, and the city could get, who knows? I don't know what the internal rate of return would be on that. I don't even know how you'd mark it or measure it. I have some theories, though. And then we see the new sort of Tryon Street corridor. A lot of growth happened there in the late teens into 2020. There's a light rail. There's a conveniently accessible stop called Carson. And so now we're at the top of the hill. We're going down the hill. We're not going to go past Tryon, but off in the distance you can see a tower. And then beyond that, that's where they first found gold. In those Piedmont Hills. What I just think is so interesting is this on-ramp. You see, it's it's so verdant, and it's great to have those trees there, right next to one of the top 20 cities in the country. So in the U.S. Hopefully that linear parkway is maintained into the 22nd century, because there is value to having an emerald necklace around your central business district, in my opinion. Here's the latest tower going up. It's on the old Cabaret site. They had to change the grid around for it. They're cleaning up the last of the old Independence Freeway. Well, not the last of it, because we discussed the Morehead South intersection, but some of the remaining vestiges of the old Independence Freeway that was built when the city of Charlotte had 150,000 people or so. I guess it was, and there's an old B-body, I think. It's fun. Those rims, though. Why would you put it on rims? That's my thing. Like, put it on the big radials. You get the comfy ride. Not everybody has to sit on sprees, Anyway. So this is at Tryon and Morehead. You can see all the growth happening in South End along Tryon. And yeah, like I said, next time I'll try to do East Morehead, some future unspecified date East Morehead, but West Morehead rather. We'll talk about the mines. I got some history. I can consult a book on that side. Anyway, check you later. Here's some photos. Bye.